The earth was young, untamed, a place where the very air seemed to pulse with the raw energy of creation, a canvas of primordial chaos painted in shades of grey and black, where the boundaries between night and day were blurred and the concept of time was but a whisper in the wind. The sun, a distant memory, barely pierced the suffocating veil of eternal twilight. Its feeble rays struggled to illuminate a world shrouded in perpetual dusk. Titanic ferns and grotesque trees, their limbs gnarled and twisted like the limbs of ancient, unspeakable creatures, clawed at the oppressive sky. These were not mere plants, but living monuments to the Earth's violent and chaotic birth. They were the silent sentinels of a world yet to know the touch of man, their roots sunk deep in the soil of a planet still trembling from its violent birth. Each tree, each fern, a testament to the raw, untamed power of nature. This was Earth, but not as we know it. It was a place of shadows and whispers, where the very ground seemed to hum with the echoes of ancient forces. This was Earth in its infancy, a world ruled by shadows and whispers, a world where fear was not an emotion, but a primal force, a force that shaped the very fabric of existence. The air hung heavy, thick with the stench of decay and the musk of unknown creatures. It was a miasma that clung to everything, a constant reminder of the cycle of life and death. The silence was absolute, broken only by the occasional groan of the earth or the rustle of something moving through the undergrowth. It was a silence that spoke volumes, a silence that held the weight of untold eons. It was a silence that pressed down on you, suffocated you, filled your lungs with a nameless dread, a dread that seemed to seep into your very soul, whispering of things long forgotten. It was the silence of a world holding its breath, bracing itself for the coming of something ancient and terrible, a presence that loomed just beyond the edge of perception, waiting to make itself known. The creatures that inhabited this world were unlike anything we know today. They were beings of pure instinct, driven by the primal forces that shaped their existence. Massive, lumbering behemoths with hides thicker than armor and teeth longer than swords. They moved through the primeval landscapes with a grace that belied their size, their every step a testament to their dominance. They roamed the primeval landscapes, driven by instinct and hunger, their roars echoing through the endless twilight. Their presence was a constant reminder of the brutal and unforgiving nature of this world. But even these titans, these apex predators of a forgotten age, lived in fear, for they were not the true rulers of this world. For in the shadows something watched, something ancient, something evil, an entity that had existed since the dawn of time, waiting, watching and biding its time. Its presence was a constant, a dark thread woven into the very fabric of this world, a reminder that even in the midst of chaos there was something far more terrifying lurking in the shadows. He wasn't born in the traditional sense. He didn't emerge from a womb or hatch from an egg. His existence was far more enigmatic, far more terrifying. His genesis lay in the fabric of existence itself, a creation not of flesh and blood but of the very essence of fear. Woven from the primal fears that gripped the universe in its infancy, he was a being born of the cosmos's darkest nightmares. He was a manifestation of cosmic dread, a being of pure terror given form. His presence was an anomaly, a blight upon the natural order. His coming was heralded by a cold wind that swept across the planet, a harbinger of the doom that followed in his wake. This wind carried with it the stench of death and the taste of madness, a prelude to the chaos he would bring. The very air seemed to crackle with unseen energy, an electric tension that set nerves on edge and hearts racing. The shadows themselves seemed to writhe and coil like living things, as if they were extensions of his malevolent will. The earth recoiled as if in pain, the very mountains trembling before his unseen presence. Nature itself seemed to rebel against his existence. He was the embodiment of everything that lurked in the darkest corners of the universe, a collection of all that was feared and reviled, all that was unknown and unknowable, given form and purpose. He was a creature beyond comprehension, a nightmare made real. He was the void staring back, the nightmare made flesh. His very existence was a challenge to the sanity of those who beheld him. His name, if he ever had one, is lost to the mists of time. It was a name that perhaps was never meant to be spoken. Perhaps it was never uttered, for to speak it would be to invite his attention, to draw his gaze upon you like a moth to a flame. The creatures of this primordial world, in their own way, understood this. They sensed his presence long before he arrived. The creatures of this primordial world, in their own way, understood this. They knew him by the fear he evoked, by the chilling silence that preceded his arrival. They knew him by the fear he evoked, by the chilling silence that preceded his arrival. It was a silence that spoke volumes, a silence that screamed of impending doom. They knew him as the embodiment of their darkest nightmares, a living nightmare that defied all attempts at understanding, a creature of pure terror that defied all logic and reason. His very existence was an affront to the natural order, a blight upon the world. And so he came to be known by many names, whispered in terrified, hushed tones around flickering fires. The silent stalker, the faceless horror, the eater of souls, each name a testament to the primal fear he inspired, each name a testament to the primal fear he inspired, each one a whispered prayer for his absence. Each one a whispered prayer for his absence. They prayed that he would pass them by, that his gaze would not fall upon them. He was the Slender Man, and the world would never be the same. His presence was a blight upon the world, a reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the edge of understanding. Silence. It was the first sign, the harbinger of his approach. A silence so profound, so absolute, it felt like a physical presence. It was as if the very essence of the forest had been drained away, leaving behind an empty shell. The normal cacophony of life, the chirping of insects, the rustling of leaves, the distant calls of beasts would cease abruptly, as if someone had thrown a switch, plunging the world into an unnerving quiet. This silence was more than just the absence of sound. It was the absence of life itself. The very air seemed to thicken, to become heavy with anticipation and dread. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. A cold, clammy feeling would creep into your bones, a premonition of something terrible about to happen. It was the feeling of being watched, hunted, but by something that defied comprehension. The creatures of the forest, those that hadn't already fled, would cower in their dens, their instincts screaming at them to hide. But there was nowhere to hide from the silence. It was everywhere, suffocating, inescapable. And then, as the silence stretched on, becoming almost unbearable in its intensity, you would hear it. A faint whisper carried on the wind. It started subtly, a barely audible murmur that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was the sound of your own fears taking shape, whispering your deepest secrets, your darkest desires. It was the voice of the Slender Man, reaching out from the void, beckoning you closer. The whisper would grow louder, more insistent, until it was all you could hear. It would drown out your thoughts, leaving you with nothing but the overwhelming urge to follow it, to find the source of the voice, to uncover the secrets it promised to reveal. And as you ventured deeper into the forest, the trees would seem to close in around you, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The air would grow colder, the darkness more oppressive. You would feel a presence behind you, a shadow that moved with you, always just out of sight. And then, in the heart of the forest, you would see him. The Slender Man, tall and faceless, emerging from the darkness. His presence would fill you with a terror unlike anything you had ever known, a fear that would consume you, body and soul. Section 4. Whispers in the dark. Where logic ends, terror begins. The whispers were his calling card, a prelude to madness. They slithered through the primeval forests, insidious tendrils of sound worming their way into the mind of their victims. The whispers were subtle at first, easily dismissed as the wind whistling through the trees or the rustling of leaves. But they persisted, growing louder, more insistent, until they were impossible to ignore. These weren't the whispers of a language you could ever hope to understand. They were the whispers of chaos, of madness, of things that should never be spoken aloud. They were the echoes of the void, the murmurings of a consciousness so alien, so fundamentally different from our own, that to comprehend it would shatter your sanity. The whispers had a way of burrowing into your mind, of exploiting your deepest fears and insecurities. They would whisper your name, calling to you from the darkness. They would remind you of your past mistakes, your deepest regrets, amplifying them, twisting them, until you were drowning in a sea of self-doubt and despair. And always, underlying the whispers, was a sense of overwhelming dread, a feeling that something terrible was about to happen. Section 5. The grotesque beauty of his garden. The ancient forests were his domain, a testament to his twisted power. Trees, once proud and tall, now contorted into grotesque shapes, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The air itself seemed to hum with an unseen energy, a palpable aura of dread that clung to everything. The very earth beneath your feet felt unstable, as if reality itself were warping and shifting around you. Strange, bioluminescent fungi dotted the forest floor, casting an eerie, otherworldly glow. Their caps pulsed with an unnatural light, casting flickering shadows that danced and writhed like living things. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decay, a cloying sweet aroma that spoke of corruption and death. The animals that dared to venture into these woods were never quite the same. They moved with an unsettling twitchiness, their eyes wide and unblinking, their bodies covered in strange growths and tumors. They were living testaments to the Slender Man's power, grotesque parodies of their former selves. The forest was his canvas, and he was the artist, reshaping it in his own image, twisting and contorting it to reflect the chaos and terror that reigned within him. It was a place of unsettling beauty, a macabre masterpiece that spoke of a power beyond human comprehension.